everyone, so today we wanted to talk about how we found confidence as doll collectors, because this is something that I get asked about rather often from people who are maybe struggling or who just want to know how we can be so open about loving our dolls, and it definitely has not always been that way. So we're going to share our experience and kind of a bit of our journey. I can't speak for anybody else. I can only speak for my personal experience. She can only speak for hers. So for like male collectors, it's naturally a lot harder than for you because people are more judgmental if you're a guy and you collect dolls, and likewise some people's families are a lot more judgmental, and it just being the two of us because our parents are both passed away, we can do whatever we want. We can live in the house the way we want, have as many dolls as we want. We don't really have those same kinds of consequences, so I guess in that way it's like easier for us, and I'll admit like kind of that privilege. There's this misconception that so many people have that when you're an adult you have to be boring. You can't have any childlike interests, like you can't like Disney, you can't like dolls, you can't dress a certain way, that you have to become really boring. And that boring equates to maturity. How you look, how you dress, and what you're into does not dictate how mature you are. How you treat people, how you respond to situations in life, how you handle stress, and what your priorities are dictates if you're mature or not. Yes, we love dolls. We have thousands of them, but that doesn't mean that we aren't adults. We both have jobs. We both have friends and social lives outside of the doll hobby. We have plenty of other interests, other things we do, plenty of things that happen that like we don't even talk about on the channel because they have nothing to do with dolls. We have good priorities in life. We know that family is important and being happy is important. We do all the adult things we're supposed to do, and you know, also we had to make a lot of decisions before I was 21 years old about Dad being on life support, how to handle Dad's medical situations, you know, signing DNR forms and his funeral arrangements, and going to a lawyer to get this house because Dad didn't have a will. Like, there were so many things, like really personal things that happened before any of 1,000 Splendid dolls happened while we were collecting dolls. That doesn't define you as a person, what your interests are. That's a misconception.
Yeah, I think we're all exposed to like a lot of the same things, and in a way that cultivates your interest, but I also think that you just have a natural part of you that will take an interest in certain things you're exposed to.
And there's no shame in that. It's no different than if you like makeup naturally, or you like cars naturally, or you like animals naturally. Exactly.
That's actually a direct quote from our mom. She used to say, oh, you know, deciding to play with Barbie, that's not the same as deciding to do drugs. And I think, and that's in part why in the early years, like, there wasn't really any pressure on either of us from the outside to like change, because Mom, you know, she was always very like, it didn't matter to her one way or another.
Mom had a level head because she saw the big picture.
Right, and
she
Dad
saw that it was better for us to have like a wholesome interest rather than to be you know, running off and getting into trouble and doing like illegal things.
And Dad, on the other hand, he was very like financially invested in the hobby. He was very into it. He thought it was a great idea. Growing up, we had a good supportive environment to be free to express our interest in dolls, but we both did have different pressures exerted on us as we got older to change. Do you want to go first?
Sure. So for me, I never once had anyone tell me I couldn't like dolls or that like try to directly shame me. But I saw Colleen get a lot of flack for liking dolls and just being different. Colleen's the kind of person that, like, when you know her in real life, people sense that something's different about her and they either prey on her because of it, like pick on her and take advantage of her, or they just treat her differently. And because of that, I was always fearful of having the tables turned. I'm a very like aware person. I always was as a kid. I've always taken in my surroundings and processed that and kind of paid attention to like the psychology of people and how they treat you if you say this or act this way. I was really afraid of facing that backlash, and also I had a lot of pressure on me from our parents and also from other people because of the way Colleen was growing up. I was kind of treated like the bigger sister, although we're 4.5 years apart. I was treated like the more mature one. I had more responsibilities. People would always be like, oh, what's wrong with your sister? You don't want to be like your older sister. Her friends would tell me that. Great friends, right? So
And this is why I didn't have any friends.
I felt a lot of pressure to always be perfect. I felt a lot of pressure to always make other people happy. That's for me ultimately what made me stop having dolls for 5 years, like stop collecting and buying new ones, and made me get rid of a few, because I felt this internal pressure from myself, and I also struggled with self-esteem, which I've mentioned a lot in videos, but I always hated myself. I thought I was boring. I would have done anything to wake up and be somebody different, and I punished myself in a way for being who I was, and so I would be like, no, you can't like dolls, that's bad.
You have too many dolls, you get rid of some.
And so for me, that eventually led into the dolls all getting packed up, and kind of steered me into like being a more stereotypical teenager, where I thought that if other people saw me differently, then I would like myself, basically.
And for me, I'm the sort of person that I never really like had the social like radar to analyze whether or not it was appropriate, and I just didn't care. And I mean, even as young as like being 13, I got a black eye because I fell on the ice, and kids at school were laughing and saying that my Ken doll punched me in the face, like because I advertised I was still playing with dolls, when I'm sure other kids were too. And I just, I'm like, oh, I don't care. I'm the opposite of her. She basically feels like if she's telling you what she ate for lunch, which is like very trivial, and you don't need to know that, she feels like it's TMI. Whereas me, I'll tell you anything and everything. I'm an open book.
It's funny that I'm the one who does more of the YouTube.
I know, and I think that's just because you're more comfortable on camera, which is funny. Yeah. Whereas me, I'm the type of person that I'll just start talking, and I won't stop talking, even when people tell me to sometimes. Whether or not they're interested in what I'm saying. And I know on some level I shouldn't do it, but I'm compelled to keep doing it anyway. But, and that's just who I am. So I didn't have that internal pressure she had to stop. But because I was the older sister and the one that people were kind of like more worried about, like...
The one that was perceived as being different.
More like, oh boy, when's Colleen gonna drive? When's Colleen gonna get a job? When is Colleen gonna move out of her father's house? Like that kind of thing.
People always had different expectations.
Like...
I mean, you even were evaluated professionally in school.
Right, exactly. People had a different set of expectations for both of us. So the thing is, it all came to a head one night when my mom's best friend took us to watch The Haunted Mansion. And I brought my Molly doll with me. I remember that whenever the butler came on stage, I would scream. And that's the sort of person I am. I'm jumpy by nature. Like, my kids at both jobs like to come up behind me and go, boo!
You're also just dramatic.
Right, and then I go, ah! Even if they just did it 5 minutes ago, because that's just my personality. And every time a butler came onto the screen, I would scream. And when we were in the car after, my mom's best friend was very upset about this. She was like, Colleen, you embarrassed me. I was embarrassed for you. And I'm like, what? What did I do wrong? She's like, Colleen, the movie had Eddie Murphy. It wasn't even scary. And I'm like, I just jumped every time the butler came on stage. I couldn't help it. And she was like, she was very upset with me. And I think I was about 18 at the time. And I had Molly with me on my lap. And by now I'm starting to cry into Molly's hair and face. And she's like, Colleen, I'm worried about you. I feel like I'm letting your mother down, because she was taking it upon herself to, like, mother us, because Mom had been gone by that point. And she's like, I'm letting your mother down because you're getting too old. Like, I'm worried that you're not going to go to college or have a boyfriend or do X, Y, Z, because, you're going to be in your 20s and carrying around a doll. Because I'm kind of impervious to criticism. Someone tries to critique me, I'm just still sure that I'm right, and the person who's saying that I'm not right just doesn't get it. I just decided that it was kind of her misperception rather than a fault with me. So instead of making me see myself or my dolls differently, it actually just made me see that relationship differently. And I'm sad to say that it damaged that relationship and made me see her differently and feel like her love was conditional and that she didn't really get the real me. And I also feel like that had been going on for a few years. Like, I remember for Shelly's birthdays, she would get Shelly doll related things when she knew that was what we were both really into.
And it made me feel bad, felt guilty, that her criticism toward you made you just be mad at her, but it made me internalize that criticism and think that there was something wrong with it.
So there were a few years where we didn't collect dolls because she was feeling the social pressures, and once she stepped away from the hobby, I guess I just didn't want to pursue it on my own. So, and the truth is, neither of us ever lost the interest. We'd go somewhere and we'd see dolls at the flea market. And it's almost like, I knew that if I tried to nudge her towards them, she would eventually cave, but I was kind of like trying to punish her for it and make her come around to that conclusion on her own, because I kind of walked by with my nose in the air like, oh, you're too good for this now.
Yeah,
like,
the interest never went away. I have this post on Flickr called Born to Love Dolls. It's kind of like this. That, like, you don't make a choice necessarily in what you like in life. Or, you know, how they say you don't have a choice in how you feel about things in life. But you do have a choice in how you act about them. For instance, like, when it comes to doll collecting, I always loved dolls and that interest never went away. But the choice was acting on that, getting back into dolls, fostering that interest, and allowing myself to be the doll collector that I always knew I was deep down. The changing point was when our dad got diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. I had just finished high school. I was 18 years old. Colleen was in college, and that put things into perspective. I eventually got back into dolls through that route. I've explained more of that in videos, so I don't want to go too far into like how we got back into dolls, but because Dad was sick, it just made us both reevaluate. We bought collector books. Those kind of led us into looking at our dolls we already had and buying more dolls. And we were fortunate in that Dad didn't really care when we wanted to buy them again. He was a little confused, and that was a really scary moment. That was a defining life moment for me, to ask him if I could buy a doll on eBay for the first time. That was a defining moment because it was like, I can either keep going down this path that I'm on, or I can be true to myself and take this risk. It took some time to adapt to being doll collectors again, and also because I hadn't ever been fully confident in the first place, like in general with anything. I remember the first time we went to look at dolls in the store at Walmart, we both would like see people, like we'd hear them coming, and we both like kind of pretend we weren't in the Barbie aisle because we felt really self-conscious. I think that that's the thing though, you tend to build it up in your head to be worse than it is. Like, you're the one thinking people are gonna care when they probably aren't, and even if they're thinking something in their head, like 9.5 out of 10 times they're not gonna say anything to you.
People are just too busy doing their own thing.
But eventually, after making yourself uncomfortable so many times, you do build up a tolerance for it. And there was this day that we were out shopping at this indoor flea market, and we found a Florida Vacation Barbie. But the seller didn't have a bag, and we didn't have any bags with us. We hadn't bought anything else. So the only choice was to carry the doll out in the open. And it kind of reached that point where I was like, you know what, like, I just don't care. I'm just gonna carry this doll. She's clearly a Barbie. She's wearing a bright pink bathing suit. I'm not fussed about it. And from then on, I wouldn't say I've ever felt self-conscious in like a flea market setting or in a store setting, like buying a doll. I haven't felt self-conscious, or when we took our American Girls to like the store. And neither time I felt self-conscious about it, because it didn't really matter to me what people thought. And generally speaking, I wouldn't say that we've had negative experiences with people judging the dolls in the passing.
No, and like, as it got easier for us, it got easier for Dad too. Because at first, you know, like she said, he was like, why? And then, you know, he'd come upstairs and he'd find that we had like, you know, naked Barbies all over the kitchen in piles. Because we were like redoing all our childhood dolls' hair. And at first he was like, what is going on here? Like, what's the point? Because you guys aren't possibly putting them all up in Shelly's room. So what are you guys doing with these? And then after a while he was just like, oh, whatever, there's naked Barbies in the kitchen again.
We have been so into dolls as little kids. Even people in our family always kind of associated us with dolls. So I don't think a lot of people in our family realized that we hadn't been collecting. So it was kind of, when we would mention them, it wasn't like they really thought anything of it once we got back into them. Like, nobody really
Yeah, they didn't really
it.
think about it.
I don't really think anyone was particularly surprised. I think that the only real judgment that I would say that we've gotten consistently is people just not understanding from a standpoint of like, they want to make the hobby about like collecting money. They want to see some kind of value come out of it. And we have a whole video on that called The Value of Collecting. I mean, I remember there was a few times in stores, like at Toys R Us, where we get like the look and the question from someone like, oh, is that for
a personal doll?
Personal doll? But beyond that, I mean, especially with sellers, they don't care. And
People have been really supportive. I mean, like, even our friend Lisa, who doesn't have dolls or get the dolls, she's given Shelly, like, old air fresheners and stuff so she can make jewelry, and she made her Monster High blanket one year for Christmas, and people at work, everybody pretty much knows I'm that weird person that has, like, thousands of dolls in my house, and they'll tell each other, and then when someone was looking to get rid of her kid's dolls, someone else said, oh, hey, you know Colleen likes those, right?
yeah, I feel like generally speaking, people either are indifferent and they kind of just accept it, like whatever, they're weird, or they want to know more. And even like people you kind of meet in the passing that aren't like coworkers or friends, like, people would ask me, like, if say we were buying dolls at Walmart, and they'd be like, oh, you collect them, do you have pictures? Like, I think a lot of people are more curious about it. I mean, why do you think like there's all of those shows about like obsessed people who have collections? It's because in a way it's kind of like a circus freak show, but I find that most people have better things to worry about than your dolls. I mean, and the people who do tend to just be assuming that it's something to do with maturity, like there's something wrong with you, and you tend to create more fear than is needed. And if people do have bad things to say, you kind of just have to laugh at their ignorance and the fact that they're really invested in what you're doing, especially if they're a complete stranger. I can honestly say that like more people have pointed out my hair color or treated me rude or differently because of my hair color in real life and online than the dolls, which, I mean, how many people these days have colorful hair? It's like, I don't even understand that. Like, you know, things like tattoos. I feel like people get judged more for that, honestly, than for collecting dolls. Because the dolls are such a weird thing that people are almost fascinated.
Right.
So, I mean, that's been my experience anyways. I know I have heard, like, horror stories of people being really judged. And you kind of just have to, I guess, take it for what it is and evaluate the good with the bad.
You have to stay true to who you are and be confident in that. And most of the people who actually matter are going to be more receptive or supportive than not.
If being a doll collector is really important to you, you should let that shine, and you're gonna attract people who get it on some level. Even if they're not, it's unrealistic to expect that you're gonna have a lot of doll collector friends in real life because it is more spaced out. I think that at the end of the day, you can pretend to be someone else to make other people happy, but you end up resenting them and resenting yourself. And I know firsthand because I did that, and I was really miserable and unhappy. And it wasn't just because, like, oh, dolls make me happy, but it's like the principle of it. When you suppress who you are and you try to change who you are to conform to this image to make other people happy, the only person that you're really letting down is yourself. And you're the person you're going to spend your whole life with over anyone else. And so you have to come to terms with that. And you just have to be willing to kind of sit through that awkward period and that period of people judging you and questioning yourself to get to a comfy place with it. And once you get there, you really don't care. And I think that's something that naturally happens as you age anyways. You've lived so much life and put up with so much crap from other people that at some point you're just like, screw it. And you do you anyways. So we'll see you guys in the next video, and until next time, love your dolls, love yourself, and love your life.